we go. My good friend Acti has joined on the main Whale Coin Talk account to get things started. Let me give you a co-host invite, Acti, so that you can help me on that end. It has been sent, sir. Nice. We got an Algo, DeFi, Degen, NFT appreciator, and Bad Taxi here. Welcome, Bad Taxi. I see you in the audience, man. Hey, Acti, are you with me, sir?
Yep, I'm here. I just got the stream up and running as well. So
cool.
We'll be ready to go. Yeah.
Awesome. Let me see if I can get some hype music in here, guys. It's a bit quiet. I'm just going to play a hype music playlist. So if it's not your favorite, Astro, no. What you know about rolling down in the deep when your brain goes and you can call that mental freeze when these people talk too much, put that shit in slow motion. Yeah, I feel like an astronaut in the ocean. What you know about rolling down in the deep when your brain goes numb, you can call that mental freeze when these people talk too much, put that shit in slow motion. Yeah, I feel like an astronaut in the ocean. She say that I'm cool. I'm like, yeah, that's true. I believe in G-O-D, don't believe in T-H-O-T. She keep playing me dumb, I'm a player for fun. Y'all don't really know my mental, let me give you the picture like stencil. Falling out in a drought, no flow, rain wasn't pouring down. See, that pain was all around, see, my mode was kinda lounge. Didn't know which way to turn, flow was cool, but I still felt burned. Energy up, you can feel my surge, I'ma kill everything like this purge. Let's just get this straight for a second. I'ma work, even if I don't get paid for progression. I'ma get everything that I do is electric. I'ma keep it in motion, keep it moving like kinetic. Put this shit in a frame, but I know I don't blame everything that I say. Man, I seen you deflate. Let me elevate. This ain't a prank. Have you walking on a plane? La 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 la. Hold hands together, God, let me pray. I've been going right around, call that relay. Pass the baton, back in the mall, swimming in the pool, can't you come on? A piece of this, a piece of mine, my piece of sign. Can you please read between the lines? My rhymes inclined to break your mind. They say that I'm so fine, you could never match my grind. Please do not waste my time. What you know about rolling down in the deep when your brain goes numb? You can call that mental freeze when these people talk too much. Put that shit in slow motion. Yeah, I feel like an astronaut in the ocean. What you know about rolling down in the deep when your brain goes numb? You can call that mental freeze when these people talk too much. Put that shit in slow motion. Yeah, I feel like an astronaut in the ocean. Gotta know Poppy get a key for the bottle. Shotty belly skin double C's, I bottle. Got a bitch that looking like a Leah, she a model. I got the pink slip up, my whip is keyless. Compton, I'm about to get the key to the city. Patty, black to the city. Forgetting out the coupe at the lot. 20 fuck 12 fuck SWAT. Busting all the bells out the box. I just get a leaf with the box. Alrighty. I see you there, John. And a speaker. Hi, John. Welcome.
Hey, how's it going? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir. I hear you loud and clear. And we are at the top of the hour as well. So if you're ready, we can go ahead and get started.
Yeah, sure. And by the way, please forgive me. I've got a bit of a flu that came on over the weekend. So I have a bit of a blocked up nose. So hopefully I'm clear.
Oh, no, you sound great. And I hope you feel better. Or if you're not feeling better, hope you feel better soon.
Yeah, no, it's not too bad. Thanks. Cool. So Leia, let's kick off.
Awesome. Good afternoon or good morning, Whale Coin Talk community. I'm here today with John Woods, CTO of Algorand. And John, my name is Noah. Welcome to Whale Coin Talk. Before we get started, do you want to give us a quick background of yourself, your career path, and how you found yourself working in the crypto industry today?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Noah, and thanks for having me on the show. So, yeah, my name is John Woods, and I'm currently the CTO of the Algorand Foundation. And my career path really has been, I guess, relatively winding. I guess I did a degree in computer engineering, and then after which I worked for Ericsson, which is a big telco, or rather, they build the systems and the software that they sell to telcos like, AT&T, etc. And so I learned a lot there. It was a software that was written in C++ and real-time embedded systems, and it was quite a baptism of fire into the software industry. And then afterwards, I moved into banking for a while. So I worked at Citi, where I was a forex trader. I worked in London on an options derivatives desk, trading foreign exchange derivatives for about 5 years. And then started moving back towards kind of applied cryptography, and mathematics, and software engineering, and worked at the Irish Central Bank, where I was a senior solution architect, building out systems in the Eurozone. And then my first job in crypto, I worked with Consensus. And so at that point, I'd already built up strength in terms of my knowledge of applied cryptography. So that's like building systems with cryptographic primitives. And so this was directly applicable then to working with Ethereum, right? Because Ethereum has, at that point, it was really a system that was, I guess, the hardest parts were understanding how the signatures worked, understanding, the cryptographic primitives that were there, understanding, how to form transactions and that kind of stuff. And so it was kind of a natural fit, I guess, moving into Consensus after my experience with applied crypto. And then after that, in terms of, I led cloud security at a company called Informatica, where I was again directly involved in the cryptography engineering on the product. And then afterwards, I moved with Cardano, which is my previous job, where I was the chief architect for Cardano, and I also led applied cryptography there. And then finally, now as the CTO of the Algorand Foundation. So I guess not a career that was constantly in the computer engineering space, but one that I think has been quite interesting. And given the balance between kind of finance and tech, I think I'm in the right place now.
Beautifully put, and quite the lucrative career path, John. So let's jump right in. Give us a high-level overview of Algorand, what it is, and why the team believes that it is the most powerful layer one blockchain.
Sure. And, here's the other thing I'd like to say. I think it's really important that as ambassadors for projects, whether it's Algorand or otherwise, I think it's important to recognize that, like, saying, Algorand is the best or like the absolute number one, to me, it doesn't really make sense to be that maxi about things. And so I think Algorand is incredibly compelling. I think, obviously I thought so because I left my role in Cardano to come and work here. And I think it's one of the strongest platforms that's out there in terms of the layer ones. But it's not perfect. And there are things that need to improve, and there are other projects that do certain things better, and there are other projects that don't do certain things as well. But yeah, so if I can just jump into Algorand, I think it's probably, as I've said a number of times, one of the only blockchains out there that's fit for purpose. So when I say that, what I mean is we talk a lot, you know, both in social media space, in meetings, in interactions with people. When we're hyping blockchain, we talk a lot, I think, and I'm speaking generally about people, about this idea that blockchain can change the world and it can change the way we do finance and it can disintermediate post-trade settlement systems, and it can be you know, a product that's going to change the face of economics worldwide. But actually, if you look at it, I don't think many of the layer one chains out there are actually able to deliver on that. And Algorand is, because it scales, it has a robust infrastructure that has had a very reliable uptime since its beginning. And on top of that, it's highly secure. And so, given these virtues, I actually think that Algorand just generally is quite well fit to execute on the types of use cases that we talk about when we're out there getting excited about blockchain. And so that was probably the reason that I left Cardano chiefly and came to Algorand. It was because after I looked at Algorand deeply, it was the first time I felt like, hey, this thing is actually going to be able to do the things that we say blockchain can do. And so maybe then digging in a little bit more so people understand Algorand, just like Ethereum or Cardano or Monero, is a layer one blockchain. It has its own consensus. It has various nodes that are part of the network that are connected over the public internet. And it has a token called Algo, which is both the kind of gas and the fee token that's used. It's also a representation of value on the Algorand network. And Algorand also, very similar to Ethereum and Cardano, it has the technology of smart contracts and smart signatures, so you can build applications upon the Algorand blockchain. So yeah, that's, I guess, a quick summary of what it is.
Great. And I want to jump in, John, to the pure proof of stake consensus mechanism. But really quick before we do that, is Algo, oftentimes this happens when you have high transaction speeds and you have high scalability, is Algo sacrificing decentralization on any end to achieve both of those?
So I think that, generally speaking, like when you're building systems, no matter what you do, there's no like perfect solution. So like if you take like custody of cryptographic keys, you can either have something that's incredibly secure, where, you know, in order to execute a signature process, you go into a dark room inside some government lab, and you exfiltrate the key material, and you load it into a machine that's had its Wi-Fi card ripped out and its Ethernet card ripped out, and you convolute the key material with the message, and then you transport that back on paper. And, you know, that's the type of thing that is going to add a lot of friction. So it's always a sliding scale between like security and ease of use. And similarly, to a large degree, there's a sliding scale between decentralization and speed and scalability, right? And so if you have a backend like I don't know, like Reddit's backend, or a backend like Facebook's backend, where these companies have, like, you know, clusters, Cassandra clusters in the cloud, and they've got tons and tons of computers load balancing the requests that come in. I think it's a lot easier to scale than if you're trying to do something in a decentralized, distributed fashion. So just to kind of preempt my answer with that. In terms of where I see Algorand's decentralization right now, I think it's pretty good. So pure proof of stake is, and we can talk about it maybe in the next question, is a very secure, very elegant way to achieve consensus in a way that scales and indeed is highly decentralized. The second part of Algorand's network is the relay nodes. So this is the Algorand nodes that are responsible for transporting information between participation nodes. So this is basically the information superhighway of the Algorand network. And so that's a place where I think it's reasonably decentralized. And by that I mean we operate relay nodes in every continent in the world, pretty much, except for maybe Antarctica. We have relay nodes running on everything from AWS to GCP to Azure to bare metal to private servers. So it's geographically and metal diverse, but I would say it still needs to be improved in terms of decentralization. So I think we want to get to a place where anyone can run a relay node and have it join the network and indeed service any of the participants on the network. And right now, as I've mentioned before, whilst the Algorand Foundation currently keeps an allow list of folks who are permitted to run relays and have those relays be discoverable by all of the different wallets that are out there. One can now run a relay themselves and permission that relay and point your wallet software at it, but it's not completely open yet. So I think that's a place where we need to really improve. I think we need to improve the decentralization of relays, but in terms of decentralization of the consensus mechanism and the security of the network, I think it's best in class.
And John, in layman's terms, how does Algorand's pure proof-of-stake consensus mechanism differ from, let's say, Ethereum's normal proof-of-stake consensus mechanism?
Sure. So, let me maybe put it this way. So, pure proof-of-stake is a so bringing it back to absolute basics. Blockchains in general are decentralized, and when you have decentralized systems, all the participants on the network have to agree on a transaction being valid or not. And so we call this agreement process the consensus mechanism. And so proof of stake is one of those. There are different ways you can achieve this agreement. Algorand uses a variant of proof of stake called pure proof of stake, and we can talk about that in a sec. But just to contrast that with things like proof of work, so Bitcoin, Monero, etc., they will use proof of work. This is where folks will be running a mining algorithm, so effectively trying to find an input parameter whose hash is under a certain value in order to process the transactions. And this generally uses quite a bit of energy. Proof of stake was kind of a move towards saying, hey, well, rather than running this kind of like mining contest all the time, why don't we have a situation where we will allow people on the network who hold the funds of the network, so that's the Ethereum or the Algo or whatever, we'll allow those people to say, hey, I will stake my money to say that this is a valid transaction. And the idea there is, if people are willing to say, if people are holding the token, so they have an economic incentive with that network. They don't want to see the network defrauded, right? If I own tons of algo, I want to make sure that the network stays valid. And so the economic thinking behind it is, well, folks that have this economic incentive, they are going to want to make sure that the network stays secure. And so that's proof of stake in a nutshell. It's basically the idea that we allow the token holders to vote on what is a valid transaction. And then to answer your question, pure proof of stake is Algorand's version of proof of stake. And the difference between it, as in pure proof of stake, and the classic proof of stake is that Algorand uses a primitive called the VRF. And so the VRF is a little mathematical module that stands for, by the way, the VRF stands for verifiable random function. And so this is a cryptographic primitive. So when I say cryptographic primitive, I mean like a Lego brick, like a Playmobil brick that can be used to build bigger systems. And the VRF primitive was invented by Silvio Micali, who's the founder of Algorand. And folks might be familiar with other primitives like signature. So we would say a digital signature is a primitive. We would say a hashing algorithm or a hashing function is a primitive. And so the VRF is similar to a signature in the sense that you have a private key and you sign a message. But the thing is, as well as putting in the private key in the message, you also put in a nonce or a number used once. And then on the output, rather than just getting out a message, rather than just getting out a signature output, you also get out this uniform string of random bits. And so this uniform string of random bits is indistinguishable from true random. And so this allows us to build a proof of stake mechanism that selects a person from the network, selects an entity or a participation node from the network to produce and validate blocks in a deterministic but probabilistic way. And so this allows us, basically, in a nutshell, it allows us to say, hey, of all the people out there holding Algorand who have decided to engage in consensus, they've decided to be online and they want to be part of the people who create blocks and validate blocks. This VRF thing lets us kind of pick one of them at random without anyone knowing who's going to be picked next, weighted by the amount of stake that they have. So the more algos, the more likely, the less algos, the less likely. And it allows us then also to do so in a deterministic way. So what that means is, as you're progressing through the blockchain, adding blocks, you can look back and you can say, well, I couldn't have predicted the people who were selected to produce and validate the blocks, but looking back, I can validate that they did indeed have the right to produce and validate the blocks. So, in a nutshell, a very power efficient, very elegant way to randomly, securely select people who are out there with Algorand to create and validate blocks in a way that can't be defrauded, in a way that they can't be predicted in advance, but also in a way that we can mathematically validate that they did indeed have the right to produce the blocks. I hope that makes sense. It's quite a complicated one to explain verbally.
No, I think you did a great job of it, John. And this question popped up into my head. Just keep in mind that I am not remotely close to as tech savvy as you are. But when you were talking about deterministic and looking back, is there ever an instance where you look back and there has been like well, how do I put this? Someone that behaved maliciously, or a block that has been recorded incorrectly.
So far, no, which is good news. So far, that hasn't occurred. But this is the important thing. It's important that anyone can verify this, right? So rather than just trust me, that you can go out there and technically, I know it's obviously quite tricky because it requires a lot of tech savvy, but technically, you can go out there and you can verify the entire chain in its entirety from the very beginning. And so yes, this VRF primitive, I want to just kind of highlight this. Like when you're building blockchains, and I've kind of learned a lot about this when I was building Cardano, or helping build it. I wasn't the only one, of course. It's really, really hard, right? Because building layer ones, it's like the intersection of so many different disciplines, right? It's like the intersection of applied mathematics, the intersection of distributed systems engineering, which is like building computer systems that are globally distributed. It's the intersection of those things with software engineering, software architecture, and of course applied cryptography. And so you've got all these different disciplines. So you can't just hire the kind of your normal software engineer. You've got to hire all these different people from different backgrounds, including testing backgrounds, performance engineers, because you got to have it fast and blah blah blah. And so it's a real pain when you're trying to build these things. And so it's super important that the foundational primitives, the foundation, like the ground that you're building upon, is solid. And so Algorand's entire consensus, the heart of how Algorand makes sure the network is secure, makes sure the transactions are valid, etc., that is built upon this VRF, mathematical and cryptographic primitive. And so I really feel like it was a wonderful design choice, because this cryptographic Lego brick is really the keystone to the security of the network. And it's really a seminal piece of work, because this VRF primitive is used by other chains. It's used by Chainlink. It's used by Cardano as well. Of course, those chains don't use pure proof of stake. They've leveraged this VRF primitive that I've been talking about in a slightly different way. But yeah, it really is a wonderful piece of work. And I think I'm not trying to shill the team here, but I just want to say that if you look at the types of people and the capabilities of the people who are working on Algorand now, it really is super impressive. I mean, I'm not talking about myself, by the way, but if you look at the people who are actually engineering it, they truly are some of the brightest minds in applied mathematics, in applied cryptography, and indeed in distributed systems engineering.
John, I meant to ask this earlier, and if you don't mind sharing with us, why
Sure.
did you end up leaving Cardano?
Yeah, so I guess a number of reasons. I mean, none of them too saucy. So there's nothing too exciting. But I guess I was excited to be able to go from. I mean, when I was at Cardano, it was great. But of course, you're still executing on the vision of Charles, right? I'm still executing in terms of where he wants to take the chain. And so, although I'm leading out architecture, I'm doing so under the types of topics that he wants to push forward on next. And so, moving then to Algorand and becoming CTO, I was able to kind of start to push my vision as to where I think we should take things. And of course, I work on the foundation side, so that's ecosystem, adoption, dev tooling, etc. It's not necessarily the core layer one, but I work really closely with Paul Riegel and Gary Malouf and other folks at the Inc. who are developing the protocol. And so I'm just, I guess, closer to the strategic vision of the project than I was at Cardano. And then secondly, as I mentioned at the start of the call, I was so impressed with, I'd heard of Algorand, right? Because it's in the top 50. So I was aware that it was there. I'd never really looked at it. And so during the interview process, when it was quite an exciting role, working at the foundation with some bright people, I thought, okay, well, I better dig into this. And so whenever I'm interviewing, I always make sure that I do my homework. And so I was playing with the nodes and I was seeing how hard it was to use or how easy it was to use. And I couldn't believe how fast it was. I couldn't believe how elegant the code was. I was looking at the node that's written in Golang. And I was really just impressed by the overall foundation, its architecture, and its ability to build things. The position from which the code was in, the general lack of technical debt, and the fact that I felt like, okay, this is something, as I mentioned earlier, that's kind of fit for purpose. This is a platform that's in a position where we can go on and make something really huge here. It has the scope, I suppose I'm trying to say, to become a world beater.
John, on that note, what are the token hardware and software requirements for the average person that wants to run their own node and participate in consensus?
Sure. So, we have these on our website. There's kind of like, formal requirements, but in general, there's two types. Well, there's three types of nodes, but there's really, let's say, for the purpose of this conversation, there's really two. There's a relay node, and its responsibility is propagating data. It's like the superhighway of information for the network. And its requirements are chunky enough. So its requirements are like, probably an 8-core processor, 32 or 64 gigs of RAM, 2 terabytes of NVMe storage because we want really fast storage. So that's like, like latest gen SSD stuff. And then also, you need a really chunky network connection. So there's lots of data. Obviously, the Algorand block time is like 3.5 seconds. So there's tons of data being pumped around all the time. So you need a network ingress and egress, which is, quite large. So, you're going to want to be able to support somewhere around 30 to 40 terabytes of ingress egress per month. So in terms of relay nodes, the requirements are relatively chunky. In terms of participation nodes, so this is the node, we call it participation, but it's really the node type that creates blocks, validates blocks. For that, one doesn't need anywhere near as heavy resources. So you can probably get away with somewhere around a dual core CPU. You could get away also with kind of like maybe, I guess, a terabyte or so, or half a terabyte of SSD, and indeed probably 16 gigs of RAM or so. So like much less. So participation in consensus, really quite efficient and quite elegant. The heavy part of the network is really in those relays. And in terms of those relays, we actually only need about 100 of them or so, or a little bit less than that. We have about 100 at the moment in order to support all of the data propagation for the whole network.
John, give us a high-level breakdown of what is unique about the Algorand virtual machine and what some differences are between the EVM that we're also familiar with.
Sure. So this is really quite a technical one. So, I don't want to assume too much knowledge, but in general, every computer out there, whether it's your Apple Silicon Mac, or it's your iPhone that also has like an Apple Silicon chip in it, or maybe it's an Intel computer, or it's has a MIPS processor in it, or whatever. Computers will have various central processing units which are responsible for processing data, okay, and doing calculations on your computer. And if you so if we so that is the standard way computers work, and if we move from that to virtual machines, so folks might have come across things like the JVM. So there's the Java virtual machine, and the Java virtual machine is similar to a regular CPU in the sense that a regular CPU and the Java virtual machine, the JVM, both have instructions that they can do. So you might be able to say to your Intel computer, "Hey, add these two numbers." You can say the same thing to your Apple Silicon computer, but you might say it in a slightly different way. But it's still able to add numbers, multiply numbers, divide numbers, etc. And similarly with the JVM, there's also a bunch of these instructions. So basically, you can think of the JVM, or indeed, if we now move to blockchain, you can think of the EVM, the Ethereum virtual machine, or indeed the AVM, the Algorand virtual machine, as kind of like software-based processors. They're like software implementations of a CPU. And so now, if we compare the traditional hardware central processing unit that's in your laptop with, say, the AVM or the EVM, they're very, very similar. They have a selection of things that they can do. We call these things opcodes or instructions. And so we can effectively ask these virtual machines to execute code for us, just like we can ask a regular CPU to execute some code for us. And so the EVM is an attempt to build a Turing complete, and that means basically a complete computer that you can write any type of code on. It attempts to be a Turing complete smart contract execution platform. And so it's important in the world of Ethereum that you can write any kind of logic in your smart contract. You can compile that and to EVM bytecode or EVM instructions, and you can upload it to the Ethereum chain, and you can ask the Ethereum virtual machine to execute it for you. And in doing so, you can lock up funds, move funds, and all that kind of stuff that folks are used to. Well, the AVM works the same way in the sense that you take smart contracts written in Teal or PyTeal or any of the languages that you're permitted to write Algorand smart contracts in, and then you compile those that logic down to instructions or bytecode, and then you upload that code to the Algorand blockchain, and then the AVM or the virtual machine, the Algorand virtual machine, will execute that code, just like a regular CPU executes, Safari or Chrome on your laptop. I guess the difference between the AVM now and the EVM is quite subtle. The EVM was designed at a time when it was an emergent technology, and there was no real hindsight in terms of the engineering choices that were made. And so I think it was an excellent attempt at building a virtual machine to cater for types of workload that it needed to. The AVM differs from the EVM in the sense that it has the benefit of hindsight. It's seen the mistakes or maybe the suboptimal choices in terms of engineering and architecture that were made by other blockchains. And so the AVM is really engineered for two things: for precision and for speed. And so you might, a lot of chains have gone, they've said, they've just taken the EVM, right? They've just said, oh, the EVM is good enough for me. I mean, everyone else is using it, so why not? And so this is a really easy thing to do, right? Because all of a sudden you don't have to build your own CPU. You don't have to figure out all your opcodes and your instructions. You don't have to maintain the instruction set. So it's so much easier just to use the EVM, right? Than it is to go and invent your own virtual machine and then build it up and maintain it, right? And so we chose, and this is before I joined Algorand, but I can tell you because I've asked about it. We chose not to take that route. We chose not to try to backport the EVM into the Algorand architecture. So Algorand is built differently. It's built to be cheap. It's built to be fast as hell, and it's built to scale. And so we just couldn't take the EVM and just stuff it in there and just say, well, this is good enough. I mean, it would have made engineering a hell of a lot easier, right? Because we wouldn't have that whole CPU thing to worry about. But in the end, it wouldn't have given as fast an experience. We wouldn't be hitting 3.5 second finality. We wouldn't be hitting 6,000 TPS if it wasn't for the AVM. So going back to my answer, the AVM is engineered for speed and precision. So I've touched on speed, and what do I mean by precision? In all computers, whether it's again like your phone or your laptop, or whether it's the AVM or the EVM or the JVM, the numbers that you represent, right? So you're always working with numbers in computers, right? Even when you're like playing video games or you're looking at photos, the CPU, of course, only sees numbers, ones and zeros, and so the width, we call it the width, but the precision with which you can represent a number, whether it's 16 bits or 32 bits or 256 bits or whatever, the how big a number you can play with in the brain of the CPU is called the precision of the virtual machine. And it turns out that Algorand has a much more precise, as far as I'm aware from when I last looked at it, a much more precise integer representation. So you can do more fine precision mathematics with the AVM than you can with the EVM. So they're the two things: speed and precision. And that's the reason why we didn't just go with the EVM, because it just wasn't going to give a good experience.
Thank you again, John, for the thorough breakdown. And can you give some examples, or at least a few current examples of complex decentralized applications that are utilizing the AVM that might not be able to utilize the EVM?
You know, that's a really good question. And I just don't know enough about the inner workings of the apps that are on the chain at the moment to actually answer that. So I don't want to guess at it and give a bullshit answer. I just if you look at some of the things that are on the Algorand blockchain, so the AlgoFis, the Folks Finances, etc. Certainly, the speed at which they operate is not possible with the EVM. But I think that's less interesting, right? Because we all know Algorand is fast. I think what's more interesting is talking about things that are making use of that extra precision that I talked about. There was one project that was asking me questions a couple of months ago. They were doing some kind of like derivatives thing, and the way they were calculating like the premium on an option, like a foreign exchange option, was like they needed to have like extra precise mathematics so that they were getting more accurate answers. And so that's one example, but I'm afraid I don't have a great answer to that, so I don't want to bullshit you.
Yeah, no worries at all. So I read that Algorand standard assets enable role-based asset control. What is role-based asset control at a high level? And you mind giving us an example, please?
Sure. So, like, role-based asset control, according to our kind of like general prospectuses, optional and flexible asset controls for people who issue assets and for businesses and for reg and compliance stuff, right? So in a nutshell, it's like saying, hey, depending on what kind of entity you are and what your use case is, you can have fine-grained control over how assets will flow on the Algorand blockchain. So let's break that down a little bit. So in general, on Ethereum, and by the way, I'm not picking on Ethereum, right? Because it's actually really good. People have put a ton of work into Ethereum. I mean, it really is a massive engineering achievement. All of these kind of credible layer ones are really huge engineering achievements. But if you look at, say, ERC20, right? The way, I don't know whether folks will be aware of this, but ERC20 is like a standard, okay? It's like, Wi-Fi 6 or 802.11ax or whatever. It's just like it's a standard for how you issue assets on Algorand. Sorry, on Ethereum. And so how does it work? Well, you take a smart contract, you put some JSON inside, like Java, the object notation format, and you define your asset, and then you issue it on the chain, and you say, well, it has this number, and it's called this. So let's say I make my ERC20 token, I call it John coin, and I put a supply of 10 million coins. And that's kind of all you can do with a standard asset on Ethereum just using ERC20. And of course, you can build abstractions around that, and you can start having control, and you can override methods, and you can derive your own standards, and you can do lots of other things to enable role-based asset control on other chains. But it's always more work. It's always extra stuff you got to go and do. And so the advantage here with Algorand is that Algorand has this asset control mechanism built in as a native indigenous feature right there inside the chain. So the types of things you can do. When you issue your asset, rather than kind of you issue it and that's just it, You can set up things like quarantines. So you can say, hey, this is a particular asset account that can you can like freeze assets if you have like a legal or kind of regulatory requirement to do so. You can force transfer an asset, so you can like claw back assets from people who've already received them, or you can force an asset to move somewhere. If again there's a legal or regulatory requirement to do so. But again, I want to be clear with this. This is not some. This is kind of an opt-in thing. Okay, this is not like I can't just go and take I can't just go and issue an NFT and then go and take it back or quarantine it or freeze it or move it. And so the point here is not to scare people. These are features that you can opt into that are supported by default when you're issuing an asset. But if you choose to, when you're issuing your ASA, if you choose and you say, hey, I'm not interested in these things, I don't want an administrative control on this asset, this is not in the context of some kind of regulatory or centralized issuance. This is a DeFi degen asset that's going to be sold to a person I don't know, and so I have no right to be controlling it after it leaves my ownership. Of course, that's absolutely fine. So these are just layer one features that enable certain use cases, especially in the traditional finance sense. But again, it's something you have to opt into. And very importantly, by the way, when you're buying NFTs or you're buying assets, whether they're any ASA or any native token on Algorand, you can see this, right? You can go and you can check on Algo Explorer, you can go and check the contract, you can check which of these things is enabled. And so therefore you have full visibility as to whether or not this is these types of controls have been turned on for the asset that you're about to buy.
Okay, so I'm glad you answered that. That was my next question. Although the potential and power of role-based asset control, I was curious to know how easy it is for the average person, the average buyer, the average participator to actually go and look and make sure that there isn't a malicious actor putting this function on and then, doing an NFT drop and then taking all NFTs back, for example.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty good, but I think it could probably be easier. As an example, right? I've got Algo Explorer open right now, and I've just opened up an ASA. I've just found an ASA by searching for it on Algo Explorer. And so as I look, there's a section called information. And in that information, you can see technical information like its creator and its reserve. You can go down and you can see statistics about it. So you can see the technical information around how it was minted. And so if you click on this technical information tab, you can see this thing like manager account, clawback account, freeze account. And so by looking on this Explorer, it takes about 2 clicks to go into a particular ASA and find out whether or not there's the ability for the issuer to freeze it, to claw it back, or to manage it in some other way. But I think we probably need to do better. I think in general, it needs to be even easier. It needs to be something nearly that the wallets show you, right? Or that the NFT marketplace shows you, rather than having to look up the ASA directly on Algo Explorer. But again, we're going to get there. This is the type of stuff I'm aware of, right? Because there's lots of people in my family who are interested in what I'm working at, but don't have the technical savvy or the time to look into this stuff in detail, right? And so I think we need to be making it as easy as possible for people not to make mistakes. But again, it's a kind of a journey, right? It's going to take a little bit of time to get to the place where it's really, really easy to understand.
Yeah, certainly. Just something that I was curious about. And John, would you mind explaining at just again a high level how sorry, I lost my spot here.
That's all right.
How man, it's been I have also an atomic transfers. Can you give us some exciting use cases for atomic transfers, and also explain what they are?
Sure. And by the way, don't worry about it. I've lost my train of thought a couple of times. I had quite a bad flu over the weekend, and so it's just sometimes it can really, as you can hear right now, mumble up your words. Okay, so atomic transactions. So atomic transfers. Okay, so this is like just a cool feature in the Algorand layer 1. It's not something that you know. It's something that other chains have tried to build workarounds for, but none of them are very elegant. And so, in a nutshell, atomicity in the context of computer science is this idea that something will happen in an instant transaction. So you can think of it like, if I pay you and then you pay me 2 days later, that's not atomic, right? That's like, I pay you, then I got to wait, and then you pay me 2 days later. If I pay you and you pay me instantly, so the act of me paying you triggers you to pay me, that's an atomic transaction, because my payment to you and your payment to me happened simultaneously, and they just like they flipped. And so that's why they call it atomic swaps. You might have heard this term, atomic swaps between chains, like atomic swaps between Bitcoin and Litecoin, or Ethereum and Bitcoin. Atomic swaps are this idea that you don't go through an escrow where I send my money and then you send your money and then it gets released, but instead we both agree to a trade, and then we swap between chains, and we both get our money, right? At the same time, without having to worry about this, like, oh, will he pay me, will he not? And so Algorand recognized, I mean, the engineering team recognized that this was the type of thing that it'd be great to have, a built-in way to do this. And
Did I rug or did we lose John?
No, I can still hear you. No,
Okay.
I think John probably disconnected.
Okay, cool. I got so scared for a second because just the reputation that Spaces has for crashing.
Hey, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, John, you're back. We lost you for a second there.
Okay, cool. Where did you lose me?
We lost you about 10 seconds ago.
Okay, cool.
So if you want, you were explaining what atomic swaps are and how, you were basically explaining how atomic swaps allow you to forego the escrow and swap between Bitcoin and Ethereum on different chains, and you were leading with that.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So the atomic swaps basically let you not have to worry that the other person won't pay you, because if he gets paid, you get paid. And so the Algorand engineering team recognized that this was the type of thing that would be useful as a built-in type in the layer one, the kind of thing that you don't have to engineer yourself. It's just there for you. And so how does it work? It works like this. When you're building, you build your transactions, and you can put them into an array. So you put them into a little box, and you say, all of these transactions must go through, or none are allowed to go through. And so this is a really powerful thing if you think about it, right? Because what you're saying is, you can take any number of transactions. Let's say we take 5 or 6 transactions. We put them into the little box, and we sign them with our private key. And so these transactions are ready to rock and roll. They're good to go. And you push them onto the chain. So you push them into a block for processing. And like I said, when they're wrapped inside this atomic transaction box, or this atomic transfer box, if any of the transactions fail to go through, they'll all fail. And it's only if all of the transactions are deemed acceptable and correct by the network that they will all go through. So again, this is very useful. It's kind of useful for, I guess, when you're building anything where you don't necessarily trust your counterparty, or indeed where you know that there's dependencies between transactions. So you know that if like 4 out of 5 transactions go through, but the 5th one doesn't, you're going to be in a bad situation from an accounting point of view, and you're going to have to start rolling back transactions. So really, really useful primitive that comes up regularly in the types of payment flows that we see on the network.
Right on. Yeah, I can certainly see what use cases, I mean, right now, that would be applied towards. John, is Algorand the only ecosystem that's using this, or are there others as well?
So it's a good question. I mean, we didn't have it at Cardano, but like, it doesn't mean you couldn't build it. You could build something like this, I think, if you had the right validation scripts on Cardano. Like, it's definitely the type of thing that you could try to abstract and build, but it would probably require a lot of engineering with a number of contracts, and effectively you're building your own escrow nearly, right? You're building a kind of a DAO'd escrow. And so it's not that you can't do this stuff technically with enough effort on other chains. It's just that it's just another example of where we're trying to make it easier to do this type of stuff out of the box on Algorand.
Got it. John, actually, let me rephrase the question. So a lot of people are comfy on Ethereum, for example,
Yeah,
with their liquidity, with their stake tokens, with their NFTs, whatever that might be. How easy is it and we've seen other EVM compatible chains do this, but how easy is it for projects to migrate over to Algorand, let's say Aave, Curve, and Uniswap, Aave, Curve, and Uniswap, how easy it is for them to bridge over to kind of incentivize, I don't even know if this is your guys' angle, but incentivize new liquidity over and new users over.
Yeah, totally. So actually, it's easier now than ever. And so there's two answers I want to kind of give here. The first one is we're building out AlgoKit, and I've talked about AlgoKit a little bit, not on this call, but in Singapore and in Dubai at Decipher. And so, in a nutshell, I won't bang on too much about it, but AlgoKit is like a totally fresh SDK software development kit that's going to give you all the tools you need in one box to build great shit on Algorand. That's basically it in a nutshell. And so it's a one-stop shop. You download this tool, you can do everything from NFTs, smart contracts, logic signatures, whatever you need to do with templating, and it helps you build, test, and deploy. Super easy, super good. And so in that sense, we're getting to a good place. We're getting closer and closer to a place where it's fun and easy to build on Algorand. But of course, these projects that you've just talked about, like the Curve, etc., these folks are already established on Ethereum, and they're already established maybe on Polygon, and they're using Solidity, right? So these guys, we've just rolled out with the help of the folks at Milkomida, or DC Spark, as they're called, an Ethereum compatibility layer. So we have a layer 2 on Algorand called A1, and this A1 technology allows you to copy paste your Solidity code and execute it in the layer 2, but running on Algorand's layer 1. So effectively, the layer 2 doesn't have its own consensus. It relies on Algorand's consensus and security model. But the actual execution of the Solidity will be done inside the layer 2. So effectively, in a nutshell, right now, you could copy, like if they wanted to, Uniswap or Curve or whoever could copy paste all of their code, drop it straight into the A1 layer 2 that we have, and they would be effectively running their dApp on Algorand in Solidity. And so this is there today. It's ready to go. And so I've been reaching out to these teams, trying to encourage them to take a look at this. And so that kind of effort has just begun, and I'm hoping to see some traction with it.
That's awesome, man. I think that's going to be so huge for your adoption. And on the flip side, the users, the investors, what are some ways that we can safely bridge assets over?
Sure. So the thing about bridges is that they're always a bit tricky, right? Because, like, the first thing is the more bridges you have, the more kind of fragmentation you have in liquidity. With traditional bridges, you have this kind of concept where you kind of lock on one side and you mint on the other. And so you generally issue these kind of wrapped versions, right? So you'll have wrapped Bitcoin on Ethereum, or you'll have like wrapped Bitcoin or whatever on Algorand. And so the problem is that now all of a sudden all the dexes out there have to support trading pairs between all of these different wrapped assets. And so if I take my wormhole wrapped asset and I take my wrapped asset from some other bridge, all of a sudden now I've got to maintain two different trading pairs for the same wrapped, effectively the same underlying asset that's wrapped twice. And so in general, I think bridges are important. I think they add some value. They add, of course, composability and interoperability with the chains. But in general, I wouldn't like to see a world where we have, a growing number of bridges, because I think it leads to fragmentation. And also the second thing is that, of course, with these bridges, you have to rely on the fact that they are implemented securely. And so this is like a non-trivial thing. For so long, we've seen situations where we thought bridges were safe on various chains, and they turned out to have unknown bugs, right? And again, I don't think that this is something that's like new, right? Because if you look at Linux, or you look at OpenSSL, or you look at like any of the traditional software that's out there, or Safari or macOS or Windows or whatever, like all of these different pieces of software are regularly seeing zero-day vulnerabilities, exploits, new ways of breaking cryptography and other things that we side channel attacks and other things that we never even thought were there. And so software is imperfect. And so in general, I would say to users to be careful when using bridges. Try to use ones which which are audited. So I would go to the actual bridge website and check to see if it's audited. As an example, I think Wormhole is pretty good so far. From what I've seen, it's been formally audited twice by reputable security companies. So I think in general, it's just a case of try to be careful out there. In general, bridges can be a little bit tricky to deal with. Just make sure that when you're dealing with one, that it's one that has been audited. There's one other bridge which I think is kind of interesting as well, which is called Messina, which is on Algorand, and it does things a little bit differently. And so I mentioned earlier that normally you kind of mint and on one side and lock up on the other. And so that's fine, and then you get this wrapped version. Well, what Messina's done is that they're kind of maintaining liquidity on both sides. So when you bridge one asset into one side of the bridge on one chain, and you bridge it back out the other, you don't get a wrapped asset. Instead, you actually get the native asset itself rather than a wrapped version. And so this might be something that people find interesting. So check it out, Messina Bridge, if you're interested in learning more.
John, what are some of your favorite Algorand DeFi applications and decentralized exchanges to farm and trade with? This is a common question that our audience members like to know.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking about this one because I got asked it a fair bit, and it's it's one of those things where I don't want to be like, oh, this one, because it's like then I'm like I'm shitting on the other guys, whatever ones I don't mention. So it's kind of a trick question. Okay, I'll tell you. I personally used Tinyman. It was the first one I used. Tinyman was the first one I used when I was like week one, and I thought it was pretty great. And I think Fergal, who's the CTO there, who I met in Decipher for the first time, although he's an Irish guy like myself, so we'd had a video call as an intro, but I met him for the first time in Decipher. He's done a really good job with Tinyman V2, and I think the team over there do some pretty good engineering, and in general, I think it's a pretty good DEX. I'm also a fan of Folks and Algify, because both of them are implemented very well. They're actually going to be open sourcing later. By the way, Tinyman is already open source, but Folks and Algify are going to be open sourcing very soon. And Impact is pretty good as well. I feel like I'm going to end up like, if I don't name the entire top 10, people are just going to give me shit. But I think in general, we've got a pretty good top 10, I would say. One other kind of shout out I do want to make, which is a smaller market that I'm a big fan of, is Exa.market. So it's like EXA, Exa.market. And so Exa is, again, not affiliated with me. I don't have any stake in it personally, neither does the foundation. But it's like an OpenSea on Algorand for NFTs. It's an NFT marketplace. And what I like about it is just this. They've done a good job making it easy to use. They've got like really good FAQs. It's clear, it's easy, it feels good, it performs well, it's pretty. And so I think they've just done a great job at building out a solid marketplace. And I'd encourage people who are interested in NFT trading, if you're interested in that, I would go over and check out Exa.market, because I think it's pretty good.
So, really quick, let's break down the Algorand tokenomics. I know that because things are so fast and so cheap, there's not much being burned for gas fees. I could be wrong. But what are some high-level utilities of the algo token relative to your ecosystem, and what's total supply cap? Also, what are some incentives? I mean, obviously, nothing that is on this broadcast is financial advice. It's all for education. But what are some incentives for people to buy and hold the token?
Yeah, I mean, so it's an excellent question. So in terms, like, I don't work on the economic side, so I'm probably not the perfect person to ask this question, because it's just not my area of expertise. But in general, the token supply is capped at 10 billion tokens. Okay, that's B with a B for Bravo. It's 10 billion tokens, and so it gets kind of tranched into various chunks. And so there's a certain portion of the funds that are held by the Algorand Foundation, and then it's broken down. So those funds that are held by the foundation are broken down into ecosystem support. So as in funds that are to be used to help grow the ecosystem. There are funds there that are used for governance. So governance is how you earn a yield holding algo. So you can hold Algorand and you you earn funds, you earn more algo by engaging in governance, which is this idea that you will vote on proposals in terms of building a decentralized kind of platform where folks can vote on proposals and where we take the platform next. And then there's another chunk of the funds that went to the Algorand Inc. Of course, the Algorand Inc. are the entity that are doing all of the engineering, right? They're building the core protocol, they're maintaining the Algorand Golang implementation, Algo D, and they're doing all of the code, all of the low-level cryptography. And then finally, I think that's pretty much it. Then the last kind of chunk is held by people like myself, yourself, and the rest of the community out there. So largely breaks down, the foundation have some for ongoing operations to support the ecosystem and to promote Algorand. The Inc. Holding, of course, they have to pay for their engineers to write the code because they all have families, etc. They have to eat. And then finally, the rest of us holding the token. So that's, I think, how the economics breaks down. Let me see what else. Is there anything else to say? I think that's basically it.
Yeah.
Sorry. You had. Yeah, sorry. I was going to say you had asked. There was like I just couldn't remember. You had asked. What's the incentive to hold the token, right? And so, again, I think, like in general, with any of these projects, we don't know whether the market's going to go up, down, or round and round in circles, right? I mean, I'm surprised that the market's gone as low as it has in this market, in this bear market. I didn't think that in general that crypto would lose so much value in terms of market capitalization across the board. But of course, none of us know exactly where the market's going to go. If there's a massive war somewhere, or there's some other economic turmoil in the globe, things could go anywhere. But in general, I'm hoping that the work that we're doing in terms of, and I can tell you, people are working really long hours and working really hard. And there's not that many people working on this thing, right? There's the people at the Inc. and the people at the foundation. So you're talking about a couple of hundred people globally that are doing all of the engineering and all of the support and all of the promotion of Algorand. So it's not like there's thousands of people out there doing this, right? It's only a couple of hundred people, if that. And so I'm hoping that the level of effort and work that we're putting in to the engineering, to the authenticity with which we kind of like interact with people, like I'm trying to be as kind of open and honest and transparent in terms of both our work, our interaction with the community, and indeed, always trying to be, I guess, integrous in our actions. I'm hoping that these things, when we add them all up, we're going to see appreciation in Algorand over time. And so, in terms of holding it now, the reason you might hold it is so you can earn a yield with governance. But in terms of the longer term vision, I'm hoping that Algorand becomes a very prominent and important part of the future, global economic financial system. And I think that it's good to have an exposure to something that has so many passionate and bright people working on it. But of course, the first thing I did when I joined Algorand, because you don't get any free tokens for joining, I can tell you that. The first thing I did was take like a chunk of my dry powder and I bought a chunk of Algorand just to have some skin in the game. So I felt like, hey, I'm working on something where I have like, a holding in this myself, right? And so I can tell you, since I bought that when I joined, I'm also suffering too with this downward trend in the market. But I'm hoping that, like I said, all the hard work we're doing in terms of pushing things forward is really going to make a difference in the long term, and we should see, I'm hoping, appreciation.
I think a lot of folks share that sentiment, investing in people that are smart and that you believe in. They're building something, hopefully, is paradigm shifting. John, right. I also think that a lot of folks that love Wolf of Wall Street would appreciate the quote you just mentioned earlier about the market going up and down, sideways, and circles.
It's so good. It's so good. I love that meme. I put out this thing yesterday. I was like, because we've been working on MetaMask integration for a while, right? And so it's for the last few, like since I joined, it's been developed, and so they've been writing the code. And so I had a demo of it the other day. It's really slick, works beauty. Like people are gonna love it. But of course, we want to go through, this is holding people's funds, so we want to go through audit with it and make sure everything is secure. So I put a note out on Twitter just to say, hey, look, this thing is coming, because it really is. And I threw up the old Wolf of Wall Street meme. It goes down a treat. I think everyone loves it. It's so good.
John, with Algorand being as fast and scalable as it is, I'd imagine that there might be a growing Web3 community, a growing Web3 gaming community. Can you give us some more insight into that? Are there any games being built or already built, they're being used, that are being played?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I think it's interesting, right? Like blockchain effectively is a big distributed database of transactions and of logic, right? So Bitcoin is transactions, Monero is transactions, but things like Algorand, they're transactions plus all of these like applications that are there that are effectively logic on the chain. And so it's not really a great place if in some ways to build games because, in general, what makes games exciting and fun? It's like your graphics processing unit in your PlayStation 5 or your RTX 4090, right? That's like throwing triangles around the screen like super fast. It's a 60-inch television that you're looking at, right? Making with great sound and stuff like that. So for me, that's what makes games exciting, that visual sonic impact. And so where I think there's two things that I think are interesting in terms of Algorand and gaming. And so the first is we've gone to Unity and Unreal. So Unity and Unreal are the two big gaming engines. They handle all of the graphics, they handle like the rendering, they handle the physics of these games. So if you want to and you want to create a game, you don't have to like do all the physics calculations yourself. You don't have to like figure out how to do all of the shader design and the smoke and particle effects. These engines, Unity, and the second one is Unreal, by two different companies. These engines are like your Photoshop for games, right? You just jump in and you can start building your game straight away inside these engines. And so what we've realized is about 80% of the games out there use these engines. And of the AAA games, when I say AAA, I mean like the glossy, high profile, $70 per game, Elden Ring, Doom, those kind of games, they use this too. Although not always. I think actually Doom uses id Tech or whatever, but ultimately most of the games out there use these engines. And so we've gone to these two platforms and we've built bindings into the Algorand SDK and Algorand backend for both of these engines. So they're not yet released, but over the coming months, we're going to have these released. And so what we're going to end up with then is any developer out there, from an indie developer in his bedroom, all the way to a major developer like EA or Bethesda or whoever, major developers and producers and software houses, all of these entities will see Algorand as an option when they're trying to build out their backend in those games. So if they want to release a new version of Rocket League with skins for the cars and goal explosions and other skins, if they want to have a new version of Counter-Strike, and in that you've got different skins for your weapons, etc., all those collectibles, progressions, awards, trophies, etc., all of those things now can be done in a few lines of code and issued as NFTs and other types of token on the Algorand blockchain directly from within the development experience with Unity and Unreal. And so I think that's probably one of the most important things we've done in terms of getting gaming closer to Algorand. Because ultimately, game developers are not really going to go out there and change how they develop, right? They're still going to use Unity and Unreal because that's what game developers use. But what they might do is if they see Algorand as an option there to build the backend, to build the coins, to build the kind of tokenomics within their game, now it's an option, it's right there, and it's a couple of lines of code. So I think we're going to see a big uptick, hopefully, in the number of developers that are out there, employing Algorand as a component within their game. And so, of course, just getting us into those marketplaces isn't just the answer. So we have to go out there and promote this, and we're going to be doing that as soon as they go live. So I think that's pretty exciting. The second thing, and last thing I'll just say, is there's a new development company called Paima Studios, and they're trying to do kind of role-based games on blockchain. So, of course, turn-based strategy games are the types of thing you can do on blockchain, especially with Algorand, with its 3.5-second finality, where moves can be done within 3 seconds. And so they're doing some interesting things. They're in talks with companies like Sega, Nintendo, etc. And in Japan specifically, in Japan specifically, these types of games are quite popular, right? So different cultures have different kind of vibes to the games that they like. In Japan, they do seem to like more of that kind of turn-based strategy type thing, as far as I understand. And so, yeah, I think that's going to be an interesting space to watch. So the two spaces are turn-based strategy games are going to be, I think, quite interesting, especially where you can, potentially gamble or game with people globally. And the second piece is engagement with Unreal and Unity, so that we're there as an actual viable option to build out your backend when you're building games in your traditional languages using your traditional engines.
Fantastic. John, I know that you have to go here soon, and I want to be cognizant of your time. I have some community members with questions.
Sure.
Before I rope them in, just one more from me, especially because the World Cup is happening. But Algorand recently announced its partnership with FIFA, and I'm curious to know what excites you most about the partnership and what kind of building activity we can expect to see on chain as a result.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess it was before my time when they agreed all this stuff, so I wasn't really involved in it. So I don't have great insight into it, but I think from what I've heard, the thing I'm most excited about is the Women's World Cup. I feel like the World Cup came up on us so fast that, like, as a technology partner with FIFA, we probably didn't get to do as much as we would have liked to by the time the World Cup came up. But the Women's World Cup is coming up next, and so we've got a bit more lead time there to do more interesting things. And so I don't have insight into it, but from what I understand, there's going to be much more exciting stuff coming out, and hopefully for the Women's World Cup, we've got some new and exciting things to play with. But yeah, I wish I could give you a bit more insight there, but I just genuinely don't have it because the Inc. are leading that conversation.
Yeah, no worries. We're looking forward to it. So Aisha, you've had your requests up for a while. So Mike's yours.
Thank you, Noah. Okay, I've seen sports, music industries leveraging Algorand blockchain for expanding to crypto space. I was thinking, what about medical field? Do you have any specific plan or program to bring medical services to the users on Algorand blockchain?
So it's so because the chain is completely permissionless, it's absolutely something that that folks can do. So there's not a direct program that the foundation are sponsoring, but there are initiatives that are coming out in terms of we're seeing technologies that are being built in the medical sphere. There was an announcement recently about this, and so I think probably the hardest thing about it is achieving privacy in that context. So how do you achieve privacy for people's medical records, especially in perpetuity when there may be breaks of the cryptographic primitives that we're using today further down the line? And so it's kind of a hard problem to solve. But in general, I think it's possible to use Algorand for kind of medical purposes. But I think it's something that requires a very solid architecture, because if someone builds something and then there's a data breach, then there's going to be really bad news.
Understood. I've read in your Medium article that you have introduced a new flexible form of storage for smart contracts, and a smart contract can create as many boxes it needs, up to 32K. I was wondering, can these storage boxes only be used to store contracts, or other data like medical records and files can also be stored?
Yeah, no, you can use it. You can use them to store arbitrary data blobs. So you can put whatever you want in there, whatever binary data you want, and as much as you're willing to pay for. So yeah, you can use them for anything.
Got it. And I was also thinking, do you have any plan of introducing your own off-chain decentralized storage solution as well, like IPFS? And is data stored in the boxes encrypted?
So data in the boxes is not encrypted by default, no, because you would need to have agreed a key with someone, and of course, you can't do that because there's no central authority within Algorand to issue you such a key or to agree kind of an ephemeral elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman agreement or whatever. So if you want to encrypt data that's stored in boxes, you have to do so yourself prior to uploading it. And then the second question was, sorry, I missed, I forgot.
Yeah. Second question was, any plan of introducing your own off-chain storage solutions as well, like IPFS?
No, there's not currently. I think IPFS is pretty good. The problem with it, of course, is that it's not permanent. It's immutable, but there's not permanence unless you pin it and host your own node. So I think in general that's a space that needs to get a little bit better. But no, we have no plans to get into that space.
Understood. What a powerful and sustainable blockchain you guys have. Thank you so much and best of luck for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Isha.
Right. Next up is Yusuf. Yusuf is an advisor to Whale Coin Talk.
Hi, John. How are you? I just want to ask a question about so for Solidity Dev, what's like the difficulty barriers to learn Teal? And is Teal necessary for algo contracts, or is PyTeal enough? Because I heard PyTeal can be compiled down into Teal.
Yeah, sure, Yusuf. Good question. So Teal is effectively our assembly language. It's like x86 assembly if you're familiar with Intel CPUs. And so, you know, Teal very much it stands for Transaction Execution Approval Language, but really it's the opcodes and instructions of the AVM CPU. I call it a CPU, you know, the AVM. And so, yes, you can write software in Teal directly, but of course you're going to, you know, it's terse and it's hard to do. And so PyTeal is an abstraction that sits above that. You can think of PyTeal more like C, the C programming language. And so you're probably better off writing in PyTeal. Everything you can do in PyTeal, you can do in Teal. They're effectively equivalent in terms of their feature set, more or less. And so as a Solidity dev, what I would suggest is you come over and you spend some time having a look at PyTeal itself. I wouldn't go down to Teal unless you had a compelling reason to do so, and I can't think of one really off the top of my head. And so one last thing I'd say is, you know, Q1 2023, so it's December 12th or whatever it is today, by next month, we should have a public beta of our AlgoKit solution. We're hoping towards the end of January or early Feb to get something out to people. And so AlgoKit's going to make it a whole lot easier. It's going to be like Truffle, right? You're going to have like a Truffle-like tool. We're going to have contract level abstraction, so you can focus on the like you can start developing inside the framework of a contract, like the same way you do with Solidity. And so I would say this: if you're a Solidity dev, things are going to be a hell of a lot easier to build an Algorand in the new year.
That's great to hear. Thank you for the clarification. There's also like a secondary question that was bugging my mind. So Algo like has claimed in the past that it cannot be forked. So I want to know: are there any advantages to not being forked? Because I feel like forking is especially good in circumstances of like a 51% attack. So are there any advantages to having a chain that is unable to be forked?
Sure, it's a good question. You know, this is something that I think people just there's kind of a miscomprehension or miscomprehension out there about this stuff. It's not that Algorand can't be forked if consensus agreed to fork in some kind of way. Like if we issued an update to the blockchain where we decided to have a hard fork, where it was written into the Algorand node and everyone was to execute that node, then the network could fork. So it's not that Algorand cannot hard fork. It's that in general consensus operation, forking does not occur. So let me be maybe a bit more specific. There's a hard fork where the rules of consensus change. And this is like when Bitcoin went from like having, I don't know, a block size of X to a block size of Y. And so everyone people who are running the node agree to like fork away like with Bitcoin Cash and like there's totally new rules to consensus. That's a hard fork. So Algorand could do that if the software was written into the node the same way Bitcoin can do it, the same way Ethereum can do it. Okay, so no change there. When people say there's no forks with Algorand, what they're referring to really is block height battles. So in Algorand, consensus is always achieved on every block. And so there's never this kind of like split of a hydra where you've got two heads on the chain for a temporary basis where you basically have a block reorg or a block height battle where there's like, you know, you might be familiar with, it's kind of hard to do this verbally, but with Bitcoin as an example or Ethereum, sometimes you can have two blocks mined at the same time. And then consensus is split, like half the network are on one side of the chain, half the network are on the other. And then eventually the chain will collapse and reorg, and then some blocks will be orphaned, and then everyone will switch to the longest chain. And so that's the fork we're talking about with Algorand that can't occur. So Algorand never has that happen. There are no block height battles, and that's how Algorand has instant finality. So in a nutshell, it's totally good. It's all positive stuff. But in terms of your one example where a fork is valuable, in terms of like, you know, where you need to address something like a 51% attack or something like that, we absolutely can fork in that example. It's just not in general usage.
Oh, okay, I think I understand now. Okay, thank you for the clarification on that. So in general, you're saying that hard forks can occur if needed, but like soft forks in general don't occur.
Yes, precisely. Hard forks can
Okay.
occur if needed, but in terms of normal day-to-day operation, as consensus is going, there's no block height battles, there's no short forks. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that's all from me. Thank you for the clarification of my questions.
No props.
Thank you, Yusuf. Captain Levi, you're next, sir.
All right. Thanks, Noah. Okay, so I want to thank you very much for bringing these terms. Whenever I speak about projects or learn from projects like this, I always go back home with lots of notes. I just wanted asking, during the course of the session, you made mention of statements where you said that you were talking about the staking process, where you said the more algos that are inclined, the more inclined that that staker is likely to become a verifier, and the less algos, the less inclined. Um, the first thing that came to my mind is that doesn't this turn it into a uniquely centralized kind of enterprise where those who hold the most algos are eligible?
Yeah, I mean, I hear your point, and yes, you are right in the sense that if you have 1,000 algo and I have one algo, you'll be much more likely. I think I'm not sure if it's completely linear, but let's say you would probably be 900 times more likely to be selected than I will be, and so to a degree, yeah, I can see your point. And this, by the way, this is a broad criticism of proof of stake. Like what you're saying there is basically the position that proof of work miners would have. Like the Bitcoin people would say, hey, proof of stake doesn't work because look, you're just centralizing it like this, as you've just suggested. My response would be that in general, by the way, I think proof of work can be okay. I know it does use a lot of energy, but it has its virtues. And in terms of proof of stake, these types of things are points of contention. But I think when you have a well-distributed currency where you slowly over time, due to the second law of thermodynamics, as the universe tends towards maximum entropy, you will see a distribution of wealth in a more granular way across the network. Then it becomes much more egalitarian. But I will concede that for proof of stake networks that are very young, where wealth is concentrated with a very small number of whales, then yes, you are right. It is those number of whales that would control consensus more so than anyone else.
So while I was asking, I figured you were going to, make this kind of statement. What came into my head is like some kind of countermeasure. What if there was a range and some requirements that have to be met? While the whales are there, and there's still going to be those who are the ones closest to the whales, they are going to classify them into maybe a set of two ranges. Is there an advantage, as long as those who are not so good as the whales are, constantly active and they meet these minimum requirements? Is there an advantage of, running the verification with the whales over the second class below the whales?
I mean, maybe, but this would be a major modification to how consensus is achieved. So we'd have to kind of discuss this over an RFC, I think.
All right, sounds good. John, I really really appreciate the time you took to mention to come here and explain. I'm wishing you guys the best, and I hope that the project keeps on staying bullish forward. Thanks a lot, Noah. Over to you.
Thank you kindly, Captain Levy.
Thank you, Captain Levi. And then we have one more audience question, Rahmat, and then we'll wrap things up.
Cool.
Yeah, thank you, Noah. Okay, so I've read somewhere that Algorand will use Falcon signatures in variety of their applications, and in particular, they underlie state proof, and the state proof enables Algorand blockchain to interoperate in decentralized way with other blockchains and also prevent quantum computers. So, so I was just thinking that can you briefly explain how state of proof going to protect Algorand from quantum attacks? State proofs, I mean.
Yeah, sure. So it's a good question. So state proofs are the name we have given to our technology that issues a proof of the state of transactions on the Algorand blockchain every 256 rounds. So every 256 blocks or rounds, there's a certificate issued that attests to the state of transactions that have occurred in the previous 256 rounds. And so it's a small piece of data which is able to cryptographically verify the correctness of the transactions within those 256 blocks. And it does so by being signed by a selection of the stakers with Falcon, which is as you've said, a post-quantum signature scheme. So there's a lot here to pick apart. Like just very quickly, we use classical computers at the moment. Your MacBook is a classical computer. Your Intel computer is a classical computer. There's this theoretical quantum computer which uses qubits, and so with enough error correcting qubits in quantum superposition, you can run quantum algorithms like Shor's algorithm or Grover's algorithm to break the discrete log, or to indeed root the bit strength of symmetric algorithms. And when doing so, you effectively destroy the trapdoor function of those public key crypto systems. And so Falcon is an attempt to use n-dimensional lattices and it wouldn't validate. And instead, we can check the Falcon signatures today, and we can see that they validate for the entire history of the chain. And that's how state proofs, in very brief language, that's how state proofs secure the chain against a quantum computer at the moment. There are two other parts to this story, though, for the rest of for the rest of quantum security. And so, if we really want Algorand to be completely post-quantum secure, it's not just the history of the chain that matters, but it's also the following two things. One, consensus. So we need to have a post-quantum VRF. We need to change the VRF I spoke about earlier and make it so that it's hardened against a quantum attack. And secondly, for wallets, we need to make sure that it's not possible for a quantum machine to reverse the discrete log and turn a public key into a private key. And so for this, we have to have two more enhancements to Algorand before it's fully quantum secure. One to the VRF mechanism, and the second to the standard transaction signature and wallet mechanism. And so when we do that, we will have Algorand being quantum secure. At the moment, it's about a third of the way to being post-quantum secure. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that very nicely. Thank you so much. Over to you, Noah.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, thank you, Rahmat. John, it's been a really great pleasure talking to you today. I know that you are sick and you're recovering from the flu. I am sleep deprived and I tripped up on some questions, but I think that we were able to meet each other at least halfway. And I found this to be an incredibly educational episode. I think that our community members felt the same way. I want to thank, again, you, the Algorand team, and I see a lot of the Algorand community in here as well, for all making this happen, for tuning in. John, before you go, we always ask our guests to leave us with a bang, right? If you had one nugget of wisdom to share with our community, just based on your lucrative experience across multiple industries, what would that be? Your life experience, your career experience. Leave us with a bang, as I mentioned, and then give us something to think about for the rest of the week.
Yeah, okay. By the way, I really enjoyed being on with you two, and I found that your questions were really well thought through and showed that you and the community really thought about what to ask. So it's one of the hardest interviews I've had because the questions were actually quite real. So enjoyed it with you. Okay, so I would just say one thing, which is two things. Number one, Algorand's going to have some amazing increases in speed over the next 6 months. We're going to be trying to get that block finality time down to 2.5 seconds, which is pretty exciting, and that will mean that we'll have transactions a second up to about 10,000, which is pretty great. And the second, more personal thing I'd just like to say is that I feel like people out there in general, when you're going through life, I found it really hard when I was in school. I didn't do great in school, in secondary school and things like that. I had a hard time in my exams. I just, didn't apply myself very well. And there's I just see a lot of kids going out there, in high school or the equivalent in Ireland, which is called secondary school. And so they're putting themselves under a lot of pressure in terms of their career and in terms of achieving, success in exams so that they can get into their choice of college or university or whatever. And I would just say that, you can do a hell of a lot in life. Life is longer than just your teens and your early 20s. And so, just I think if self-learning, teaching yourself things, reading yourself, researching yourself, the internet's an incredible tool. And I think all I'm trying to say is that you can kind of achieve whatever you want to achieve with enough effort and enough passion for a subject. And so even if you don't get the points you want or the qualifications you want to immediately jump into the university or college degree, whatever that you want to do, don't give up on that, because I didn't give up on it, and then I pushed myself through that, and I ended up getting to achieve and work in the things that I wanted to work in. So even if things don't go great for you when you're 17 years old, I think keep at it, keep working at it, and just don't put yourself under too much pressure will be my key takeaway.
Well, thank you, John. I think that resonates with a lot of people, and yeah, that's the end of the broadcast. Thank you, everyone, for joining. John, thank you again so much for being with us. Algorand community, Whalecoin Talk community, thank you for joining in. My name is Noah, and tune in for the next one. Signing out for now. Take care.
Thanks, Noah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.